Log entry. This week's pages: a president reaches Moscow, conquistadors step into Florida, forces move on Manbij, a chemical weapons treaty is signed, Surveyor 1 settles onto the moon, troops enter the Golden Temple, and VHS appears in Chicago. In 1988, Ronald Reagan began his first visit to the Soviet Union with an arrival in Moscow. The moment carried the weight of a superpower summit and the long strain of the Cold War. Reagan came as President of the United States to meet Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev at the Moscow summit. Cameras watched the arrival. But the core event was the meeting itself and the fact that it was happening. Such visits mattered because they turned rivalry into direct contact at the highest level. A summit in Moscow marked how far the two powers had come from earlier decades of sharper confrontation. In 1539, Hernando de Soto landed at Tampa Bay in Florida with 600 soldiers. The stated aim was clear and hard-edged: gold. The expedition entered Florida under de Soto's command, moving from Tampa Bay with men and ambition. It joined the long sequence of European incursions driven by conquest and expected wealth. The landing mattered because it fixed one more early colonial encounter onto the North American map. It also showed how exploration and violence were often carried by the same ships. In 2016, the Syrian Democratic Forces launched the Manbij offensive during the Syrian Civil War. The objective was the city of Manbij, then held by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The SDF began operations to capture Manbij from ISIL. Place and purpose were specific from the start. This mattered because control of a city in war shapes movement, authority, and the next phase of fighting. The offensive became one of the week's entries in a conflict already marked by many campaigns and many civilians in its path. In 1990, George H.W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev signed a treaty to end chemical weapon production. It was a Cold War page, though one pointed toward restraint rather than expansion. The President of the United States and the Soviet leader put their names to the treaty together. The act was formal, public, and closely watched. Its importance lay in what it sought to stop. Ending chemical weapon production signaled a shared limit between rival powers and gave the record of late Cold War diplomacy a concrete line. In 1966, Surveyor 1 landed in Oceanus Procellarum on the moon. The achievement gave the United States its first soft landing on another world. Surveyor 1, part of the Surveyor program, came down on the lunar surface in Oceanus Procellarum. The machine had to arrive intact and settled, and it did. This mattered in space history because soft landing is a technical threshold. Reaching the moon was one thing. Reaching it gently under control opened the next page of planetary exploration. In 1984, Operation Blue Star was launched by the Indian government at Harmandir Sahib, the Golden Temple, in Amritsar. The place itself made the news grave from the first reports. The Golden Temple is the holiest shrine for Sikhs, and the operation began there and continued beyond its opening day. Military force entered a sacred site. The event mattered because action at a place of worship carries consequences far outside the battlefield. It joined political conflict, religion, and state power in one of the week's most painful entries. JVC introduced VHS videotape at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. At first, it was a product debut. Later, it would become the winning side of a format war. The introduction placed VHS before the industry, while Sony's rival Betamax system stood as its main competitor. The setting was a trade show floor, but the stakes reached into living rooms. This mattered because formats shape habits. VHS would eventually become the predominant home video medium, changing how films and recordings were stored, rented, and watched. The page closes here. Same page, same time next week. Which discovery here surprised you most? Name it.